So I'm here this morning with Ravi. Ravi, you've written a book about exceptional leadership and some others that are in the pipeline, but let's start with a history lesson, really, because I note that in the book, The Quest for Exceptional Leadership, you talk about how perhaps capitalism has gone too far, where the cosy relationship between politics and business. I mean, communism is an alternative system, but that has problems as well. So, but start with, this sort of cozy nexus between business and politics, please.
Well, we all know today that most of the people in the world are suddenly discovering that the world is not heading in the direction they thought it was heading. The so-called prosperity, which was experienced by a few, they found it was short-lived. And they are worried about themselves, their future, their children's future. The concept of peace and happiness has undergone a transformation, and they are today in a VUCA world. Volatility, uncertainty, confusion, and ambiguity was so far applied to business and political leaders. But I think they are safe in their heavens. It's the ordinary folks today who are living in a VUCA world. They don't know what this evening will hold for them. To work, they don't know if they'll come back home safe. They don't know if they'll be able to keep the job they have. And they are worried about it. Now, this is a well-founded worry, but simultaneously, the business leaders today are also not as confident about their business forecast as they used to be. Now, I think reality is dawning. And basically, people are beginning to realize that the 20 years between 1990 and 2010 were not a normal course of history. It was a runaway prosperity shown by GDP figures, which was a result of extraordinarily high liquidity and lending. So we created money which didn't exist. And we enabled people to borrow, which they normally were not able to borrow then. So everybody was happy, and whatever assets we owned, their paper prices went going up. And now, as they say, chickens have come to roost. Right. And therefore, we have a dilemma. We have a trilemma, actually. The political leaders are at a wit's end on what they should do to hold on to power and get re-elected. The business leaders, barring a few exceptions, have found that the nexus they had with politics, which made them continue to succeed, no longer works. And the common people are finding themselves to be a tool being played around by business and politics, and they have now become a victim. And you started with the concept that the capitalism itself is in danger. And I think I like to quote this famous sentence I read somewhere in the Wall Street Journal 2 years ago, that what's wrong with the communists is the communism. But what's wrong with the capitalism is the capitalist.
Yes.
He has started taking advantage of situation, maneuvering the situation, cooking the books, and trying and get the stock market growth to increase their wealth. So I think we are come to this situation which won't last long, but right now we already have a dilemma. We have very few good leaders in the world today.
Yeah. I mean, I was in Poland the other week, and I note that they seem not to have learned from our experience over here. They are into luxury brands, spend now, pay later. It seems as though every economy makes trips over the same mistake. So they're in love with sort of premium brands. And I think a lot of businesses have moved there. And the question of moral hazard seems to be alive and well. And the design fault perhaps is the human being here. But there's got to be hope, Ravi, hasn't there? I mean, tell me a little about what you do to try and persuade leaders to do things better.
Well, I think I said, look, I shouldn't have a view of my own, because then it will be seen as something which I am trying to propagate. No, I put myself in the shoes of the business leaders. And I said, look, they have had a great innings, multiple innings so far. But suddenly they find that the success is eluding them, barring very few industries. So what has gone wrong? Till now, there were certain patterns of success which were acceptable, certain qualities of a leader which were acceptable. But today, success is measured on different criteria, and the leadership traits required to succeed after have undergone a change. And I've depicted it by saying that there are certain base camp leadership traits which till now were sufficient to do very well and continue to succeed. And these were, I call them the traits of the body, the physical traits, like a lot of stamina, energy, drive, willpower, ambition. Then traits of the mind, ability to lead, conceptualize, create teams, delegate, persevere, remove obstacles, and become successful. These were okay till now. To succeed hereafter, we need traits of the heart, the traits of the conscience. And I believe there are three traits, and I call them wholeness, compassion, and transparency. Now, I think the wholeness is the defining trait. It's basically a trait that as a business leader, as a political leader, we all live under the same sky, but we have generally a small view of the horizon. But let's assume that I have a 360-degree view of the horizon. Every CEO believes he has, and he takes a view on that basis. Now, so far this view was okay, but a CEO has to reckon that every decision he takes and every action he takes has a conscious or unconscious impact, predictable or not predictable, on the periphery of the society. He therefore has to get into the shoes of those people who may be impacted by what he does and take another 360-degree view from their perspective. So the concept of wholeness mandates a 720 view before a business leader takes a decision. A 360 view from his perspective and another 360 view from the perspective of those who may be impacted by his decisions. Now, if his decision is based on the wholeness concept of 720-degree overview, he will never have an opposition to his decision. And he will still be finding that he is successful and can make money. And if he does this with compassion, which means not to consciously do harm to anybody else, but take proactive steps to consider the adverse fallout and make sure that nobody is adversely impacted. And then there is the concept of transparency, which is very simple. Generally we do our business holding our thumb like this, and we generally are trying to show that, look, we have everything hidden, because if I leave it, I'm concerned my wealth will fall. But now, that's why business like this, open palms. People don't mind your having wealth, but if you try and do it surreptitiously, people don't like it. So if you have wholeness, if you have compassion, if you have transparency, then you are likely to succeed in hereafter, even in more difficult times, in whatever you do, in whatever business or organization or country you lead. So that is my concept of an exceptional leader.
That for me I'm a master of catchphrases, unfortunately, but I think that certain leaders around the world are HR people. What I mean by that is hippie realists. It's so. In fact, you're not coming from this from the viewpoint of someone who's philosophized. You worked in industry, haven't you, for many, many years?
Yes.
So your learning is informed by a realism, but also an optimistic hope, which is the HR, the strange mixture. I think Richard Branson is a hippie realist. Actually, he has dreams, but actually they're bounded by the practical realities of that. So I mean, so tell me a little bit about your background, and then we probably need to close up for this particular interview. But your own self.
Well, I myself have led 4 companies. I was chairman of 4 companies in the Tata Group in India. When I left them to set up my own consulting company, and since we have been acting as advisors, mentors to many global corporate boards on basically rethinking global strategy and emerging markets role.
Yeah.
And we encourage them to follow the laws of the lands where they go to, and not try and find shortcuts or establish political contexts to gain a short-term gain, because that will not be preservable. The presence in such countries on such terms will not lead to sustainable profits. In fact, the message I give to CEOs is, and I do that very often, at least once a month to a global audience, that look, I am suggesting not an act of philanthropy. The traits of leadership required to do well in your hereafter are in your self-interest. You have only 2 choices. Either you accept the concept of wholeness, compassion, and transparency willingly, or you will be forced to adopt these grudgingly. But by then, you will have lost your leadership advantage. And the new breed of youth leaders, they don't have a baggage of history. They do everything up front. And those who succeed eventually will be those who continue to be up front. So I think, I mean, the concept basically is that if you want to be only wealthy in life, then perhaps nobody will listen to me. Because if they are after wealth, there are many ways of making money in the world. But if you want to be wealthy and happy, then the path which I have proposed, I think they will have to follow some path similar to this, if not exactly the same. But it will have to be a path which considers that they cannot play with nature, they cannot play with society. You have to fall in line with what society expects you to do, because they are wielding enormous power of social media which didn't exist earlier. So we are going to see a drop in business politics nexus. We are going to see a new youth with new ambitions of integrity. We are going to see new educationists who are, many of them are now turning out new leadership, which hopefully will be incorruptible. It may take some time. But I think the forces of change are likely to have an edge over forces of status quo. And therefore, the time to change is now, not later.
And it's what I call, or what Professor Charles Handy calls, you alluded to it, I think, in your own expression, a proper kind of selfishness. So it isn't just a dream; it's one that's informed by, actually balancing purpose with making a profit, and is a new kind of selfishness, not pure selfishness. Emotional.
Yes. Yeah, Dalai Lama, His Holiness Dalai Lama, puts it across in a slightly different way. He says it's perfectly fine to be selfish, but be wise selfish, not foolish selfish.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So long as you take care of your interest without harming others, it's fine. But if you are harming either society or any part of nature, then that success will not be lasting.
Indeed. So I'm going to introduce a proper kind of selfishness here, because I know you have another meeting to go to. So I'm going to allow you to do that. And I'm also going to mention your book, The Quest for Exceptional Leadership, which is not at all selfish on my part, but I do encourage people that watch this to find out more. We need probably a different kind of leader that may have impact on how leaders are selected, rewarded, encouraged, and all of those things. As you say, it's a balance. It's not just short-termism. It's not just me. It's us. And I think there is a movement around the world, a lot of people within Nadine's network and other people I know that are coming to this level of consciousness that say, if we just look after number one, we're not going to be on this planet for much longer. So I really want to thank you for speaking this morning. And I hope that we will eventually get a passage to India to do some work together, Ravi.
Thank you very much. It's been wonderful talking to you, and I like the way you summed it up. And I think Pope Paul used a similar term when he said that life is not about having more, it's being more.
Okay.
And that's what I always say. That's the reason why we are called human beings, not human havings.
Yeah.
So I think the word is for us to enjoy if we can be great human beings. And then we will have what I call the triple top line in our lives. A feeling of joy, peace, contentment, not only in our lives, but also in the lives of all the people whose lives we touch. And that's a great, great feeling to have.
Ravi Chaudry, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been great talking to you. Thank you very much.